to do it?
Just let the recording start. Okay, so today we have a special guest for you guys. Fellow Slavic witch from Czechia, Anima NOIRA. Welcome, Anima, to the channel.
Hey, Demetrius.
Okay, so today's topic will be Crown and Slavic witchcraft. So we will talk about Saturnian magic from the Slavic perspective. And the reason why I invited you to this podcast is because I watched your Facebook posts and you definitely are willing to talk about controversial subjects, which is what we want on this channel. We want to discuss on this Legion of Lilith something which is controversial and original. So I'm gonna start this by sharing a personal anecdote. When I went deeply into Saturnian mysteries, I received from Slavic goddess Morana a particular rite, which technically has a name of killing off people who are near death. So you technically kill off those people and then harness enormous amounts of energies in order to open up the weak spots in the veil, so that veil between the worlds can be penetrated and the spirit world and the human world can be corrected and connected in a really intense manner. This is a really advanced form of Saturnian alchemy, and you definitely discussed and practiced something similar in your life, and you discussed it a lot. So, how you started practicing Saturnian magic? Can I ask that question?
Okay, well then let's get to the very beginning. I would say that it doesn't start in this life for me. Anyway, I remember from my past life memories that I was like a Luciferian, Saturnian cultist in many lifetimes. So many previous centuries, stuff that we know from myth and legend, covens, lodges, random surviving pagan cults, or in the cities, of course, occultism was practiced also among the noble folk. So it doesn't start for me just in this life, where, of course, I was raised Catholic. I deserted from the faith as a teenager. I went to Satanism and witchcraft for empowerment. But really, where it starts, let's answer a yet different way. So I learned later in my life, because when I was a child, I just thought it was just, old hippie bullshit. My father actually conceived me ritualistically with my mother. He didn't do it with my younger siblings, but I had a horoscope of not just my birth chart, but a chart of my conception. And they went on their honeymoon, my parents, to a very strange place, which I've been there later. It just reeks of something occultic and especially, as you would say, Saturnian current. It is a hotel which was used during the Nazi occupation as one of their headquarters, I believe. And it was still called the Hotel of the Black Eagle, like the Germanic Black Eagle, the infamous symbol of their, the domination. I think they removed it later because it became too sensitive politically. But back when I was still a child and when they conceived me at that place, it just had this giant emblem. And actually that Black Eagle came to haunt me and talk to me much later when I was a practicing conscious occultist in my early 20s. And it started like basically giving me offers, calling me by my birthright. I think that's what it was. And even telling me about the plans, about the plots, what is going on in the world, this like Luciferian takeover, like the New World Order stuff. So I think I was born into this, actually, but I just didn't understand for the longest time. And then I was also seeing the Grim Reaper I call him Lucifer the Grim Reaper, but for the longest time I wasn't even sure who this spirit was, or I had it wrong, because it was just a skeletal figure in a cloak. So we would call him Death, Angel of Death, or whatever, the Grim Reaper. I think he's a form of Lucifer, but I only realized that much later. What I knew for sure was that I had some affinity with this spirit because he was with me since childhood. He was like my older brother, always comforting me, always telling me secrets and about the future. Lucifer also had different forms, like more sexually attractive, more humanoid. This one just seemed ageless, but it wasn't scary. There was something about him that was just trustworthy, and I think it's been our centuries and millennia long alliance that just made me feel so trusting of this spirit, even in times when I have like sworn off all of the occult, which happened a bunch of times. A few times I just was feeling like I'm losing my mind. I need to take a sabbatical from all of this. I just need to collect myself and see where the truth is, because I felt like I was being pulled into a million directions, manipulated, used as a pawn in these power games. So that's a long answer to how did I get started on this path.
So I am interested in only one detail here. So I listened to everything, and it's technically pretty weird, creepy, and unusual story, which I like, to be honest. Like, the weirdness and creepiness and strange undertone is proof to me that you didn't make shit up.
Oh, sure.
So,
Oh.
so here is the thing. Who was the Black Eagle? Because first I thought it was Wotan or Woden, but then I realized, hey, wait a minute. Wotan's animal is a raven and not the eagle. So it's
No,
not Woden.
this was definitely an eagle, and I have been what I would think, but I don't have any. I didn't give this much thought. It's just something that came up as a memory. I think it is a symbol of this ancient Roman, basically like a fascist military world order. It was a well-known symbol in Prussian Germany, which was a very militaristic society. So I think it had something to do with that. And it
So,
might have just connected to me because of the place, because basically
so
that's where I incarnated. When the sperm enters the egg, this electrical reaction occurs and something is sparked up. So it does matter, I guess, when and where it happens.
so
It
technically,
falls
since
in certain spirits.
yeah, but since you don't know who it is, I technically have a crazy theory. It can be incorrect, but like we are Slavic people, and I think you can understand this theory maybe a little bit better than some of the other people I called upon. I kind of never discuss Slavic pantheon on the podcast here because it kind of can sound weird to the Slavic people, because I always have to like talk about history a lot, and to the Americans it's irritating to listen about Slavic history and the Slavic culture and shit like that. But you mentioned the eagle. I also mentioned the association of aforementioned eagle with the Prussians, with the old Prussia, right?
Yes.
You also mentioned the association of that same eagle with death, unjust order, and oppression and hardship.
Basically, because I refused that offer. Like when I
Yeah.
had this vision in my 20s, it was basically telling me, come on this ship, like let's do this together. You are one of us. And I was like, no, fuck you, fuck the New World Order. This is not what I stand for.
I tell you like who I think the eagle is, right? Because I think there is a really sentient and ancient intelligence behind the eagle. It's not simply the egregore. So technically, the old Prussia, the great part of the old Prussia, was actually inhabited by partly Baltic tribes and partly Sorabian, aka Eastern Slavic, aka Vendish tribes. Their language was pretty similar to Czechian. So the language of the Slavs in Eastern Germany was technically the archaic version of Czechian. It was technically one of the last pagan places in Europe. And
Yes.
one of the venerated gods there was known as Charnabog. Okay, Charnabog is also still venerated in the Balkans. He is known as the devil, but it's technically not the devil, theologically and mythologically speaking. It's definitely Charnabog by all of the attributes and means. So Charnabog is attributed to all of the things you listed that eagle is attributed to. So Charnabog is attributed to war, to hardship, to unjust order, to secrets, to mysteries, to slaughter, and he is also attributed to extremely baneful forms of magic. So
Could
since
could very well be him. I just found no better name for him than Lucifer the Grim Reaper. But Chernobog, Cherny is black, so it literally means for the English speakers out there, the black god. And there was also a white god. You know, there was a polarity, but this is definitely his like death face, the black face.
yeah, but I don't know, is that Grim Reaper Charnabog? I think you are working with the Grim Reaper aspect of Lucifer. But specifically for the Black Eagle, I am 100% sure that it is a form of Charnabog. Like, you can cut my left hand, I can swear that it's a form of him.
Oh, well, if you can swear, then I'm sure that this was his way to finally,
Yeah.
I guess, introduce himself.
Yeah, but and there is also one more thing to kind of discuss here. This entire Chernobog and Bielobog dualism is like something which, from my experience, I personally disagree with. So that entire Chernobog and Bielobog dualism is technically a reinterpretation of the actual myth, which is reinterpreted in like 19th century. So Bielobog, let's look at the mythology we have. So the Bielobog is technically one of the titles of the Perun, and Perun is, as you probably already know, the lighting, thundering god of the heavens in the old Slavic pantheon, and how he behaves in the mythology of the Slavs is definitely not some white guy who is like replacement for a Christian god. He is really furious, warlike, and wild. So that entire battle between Chernobog and Bialobog is technically a battle between the aspect of the heavens and the aspect of the underworld. It is not the battle between good and evil. If you
Oh,
actually,
definitely not.
so did you hear me?
Yes.
So if you actually read the mythology and the fairy tales, there are many instances in which devil, aka Chernobog, does good things. For example, there are fairy tales in which he teaches people how to forge, do
Oh,
medicine,
yes.
resurrect the dead, find wealth. And there are also fairy tales in which Saint Tilia, aka Perun, is the crazy guy who kills with lightning. But there are also instances in which Chernobog is the crazy lunatic who throws people into flames, and
Oh,
Saint Tilia is like beating Chernobog up. So this is like a battle between two energy forces and two ambivalent guys. It's not a battle between good and evil, and that's like not something majority of people understand. Like this entire reimagination of like Chernobog against Bielobog battle isn't supported by the lore we have in the Slavic countries to this day. I actually like talked to one guy who was like a traditional Wallachian sorcerer. He disliked the fact that I worked with the jinn, so he cursed me. But due to that,
sorry.
due to that interaction, I learned to work with those spirits myself, because the only way for me to save my ass was actually to summon spirits from the pantheon. Because Cliphotic sorcery didn't work against this guy,
It
because
is
he
true. You have to counter the forces of a psychic attack with the same forces. Sometimes opposing forces will just not work, and you have to improvise.
you kept so, and I was forced to improvise. So we kind of talked about this earlier. So I kind of need to introduce you to one more guy from a Slavic lore. You know all of those crazy legends about women drowning in the rivers? Like when you go to Czechia, for example, there are weird stories about people building bridges and then water doesn't allow bridge to be built and then they throw people in the water and then bridges built, etc. The reason
Yes,
why crazy
there was a
legend,
lot of sacrifice, like
yeah,
architectural sacrifice. When you would build something, it would take a life, or you would even bury a baby in the,
yeah,
at the foundations of the bridge or the house.
yeah. But like specifically for the bridges, the reason why they did it is because they kind of worshipped the Vodanoi or the Vodan, right?
Yes, the
The
water sprites.
yeah, the water god. And he is also the king of the water fairies as well as the water spirits. So he is heavily associated with painful magic, human sacrifice, but
Oh
also
yes.
fertility and healing. So this entire dualism is like something I don't get. But can you tell us, like, because I really rambled a lot, I think maybe even a little bit off topic. Can you tell us how you summon Grim Reaper? Some chants, some rituals?
Oh well, sorry, I don't really have anything like that. We have just always had this connection since childhood. But when I do want to summon spirits formally for the purpose of spellcraft, basically, or like let's say making a pact, updating a pact, uh, basically to present a petition, I would sit in my temple room in a private place. I don't really care about timing. I just do these things whenever I feel the spirit is close, which is very often just spur of the moment. And I would start by drawing a sigil, a symbol, or when it is a petition or a pact, then I would get a good paper for it. I would use magical ink. That is the one thing that I would use. Like I would use parchments. I would use magical inks and quills, just so that I honor the special nature of the moment. But the truth is that I have done spell work successfully and petitions to spirits, which were literally just written in my journal. So when your connection to the spirit world is solid, you will over time drop all the ceremonious stuff. You don't even then have like altars uh, and special tools. There is a lot of chants out there. Like the Satania YouTube channel has done some great work when it comes to sound magic. So you can use those. And you can even create your own sigils. I mean, spirits can tell you their own secret names. They will show in different forms to different people. So it's really up to you to figure out. And they will show you in such a form that is acceptable for you. And for me, this was the right form because I was just always torn between black and white magic. I just didn't want to be a pawn in some kind of a game. But there is this very old legend where this poor mining worker who has just had his like seventh child born, so he doesn't know how he's going to feed it, and he's kind of frustrated and depressed, but he needs to have the baby baptized. And in the old days, you needed a person to vouch for you to get a baptism, so you needed a godmother or a godfather. So he walks out, his mind all scattered, looking for the godfather for the baby. And different spirits basically present themselves to him. They're basically offering him to take on the child as their own. So he meets some kind of, weird man who reveals himself to be an angel, the messenger of God. And the miner is like, oh, I don't want you to be my godfather because you only help the rich people. You only help those who are already in the power. You have never done anything good for my folk. And then he meets this weird hunter who reveals himself to be a devil or a messenger of the devil. And he gets rejected too, because this miner doesn't believe that the devil can really help him or his folks. And so, you know, it's getting dark and he has to come up with something. And then he sees this figure who looks like the Grim Reaper, just somebody coming from the field who is carrying a scythe. And this man carrying a scythe reveals himself to be the actual spirit of death, the angel of death. And the miner is finally pleased and he says, yes, come to my house, be my godfather, because death is just to everyone, rich and poor alike. Like, you don't take sides, so that is why I want you. And then I think the baby is then born with a special gift for like healing, and becomes a great healer. And there's many versions of this legend, but that was something that just rings very true to me, and that was why I kept this alliance, because I just felt there was some neutrality, you know, like death is really impartial. And I think that's one of the reasons why Santa Muerta is getting so wildly popular nowadays.
So, like, I will just share with the audience two chants for calling two mentioned Slavic gods in this interview. So, chant for calling Chernobog is Charte, Chorte, Cherte, Djavole. So, if you don't hear the chant well, simply replay the video again. And chant for calling Morana, the goddess of death, is Moro, Moro, Morano. So those chants should be repeated in a sacred space, so you have a guarantee of summoning the entity which you intend to summon and not some imposter. But I kind of agree to you that Saturnian gods of death like Morana or Santa Muerte or Grim Reaper form of Lucifer, they seem to have a equal treatment to all men.
Yes.
And they seem to impart wisdom quicker than majority of spirits, but they always impart wisdom through difficulty, which is much higher than the difficulty presented by other energies or spirits. What I wanted to say is that there is a glorification of bloodlust within a Saturnian current, which is not, how can I say, a bad thing. When you practice Saturnian magic, you feel an urge to end life of living creatures. What is the main challenge, however, in Saturnian sorcery is learning to control that urge and use it for the purpose of necromantic alchemy. For example, we both feel an urge to end life with curses. So we have three choices. One choice is to curse our enemies and have petty fights with them. That's what majority of people do with Saturnian magic, okay? Another choice is what some more crazy people do, which is to find innocent people and physically kill them in sacrificing rites. I think there are instances in which that is justified, but in majority of cases, people who do it go insane because they cannot handle the energy they are harnessing. So for those reasons, such rites are impractical. And there is a third way of using those rituals, which is to technically call those forces of death to end life when it is necessary. So to end life, which is unnaturally prolonging himself. Now, there is an aspect to this which is really, really interesting. So there is a legend of Koshchei the Immortal. He is kind of present in fairy tales in Russia and Czechia. In Serbia, he is known as Baščelik, but it's essentially the same figure. So Koshchei the Immortal technically made a pact with Morana. But when it was his time to die, he used his sorcerer's power to bind Morana so she cannot kill him. And so other gods and heroes were petitioned to kill him, and at the end they succeeded. But there is a legend of that sorcerer, binding Morana to kind of escape death. What I tried in one of my experiments is to technically see does he actually exist. And the answer is he indeed does exist, and the rites he performed to bind the Lady of Death indeed exist too. But in my experience, if you want to work with the Lady of Death, you shouldn't try to bind her. Because first, it's really, really difficult, and second, it's kind of asshole move to do. Because in order to be powerful enough to bind her, you need to work with her for decades, maybe even centuries, because it's possible to kind of extend lifetime a lot through those Saturnian mysteries. But what I wanted to ask you is, since you are a tarot reader, how somebody can increase psychic abilities, intuition for tarot and divination. To be honest, I am retard in tarot. I don't use it, so it will be
That's a good question for sure. I have taught, dozens, if not hundreds of people to read tarot, especially, or other forms of divination. So I have seen throughout my life repeatedly it can be taught. But here's the secret. I don't think many will believe me, but this is what I've discovered. First, the more worldly part. You basically need to let go of subconscious and culturally programmed inhibitions. So you need to find yourself in a supportive environment. You just basically need a group of people, or even just one teacher who will tell you, yes, do this, it's okay, improvise, let go, open your mind, speak what you're seeing. You are not crazy. You can trust your vision. That's all it takes. And I know people will think, oh, that's crazy, that it cannot be just like that. But no, it is like that. People have the sixth sense. They are just afraid to use it because oftentimes they have been subject to ridicule, or they have different doubts, they are afraid about the things that they will see, what to do then about them. And I can address all these concerns with them. So I think you need supportive environment or a teacher. And this needs to be done in person. I don't really think that divination is well taught, like from books, or I don't know, you have online courses these days. And that's the second part of the secret that I've discovered, is that you actually get the gift almost physically from someone who has it. Just by being in their presence, just by like touching the same objects, by interacting with them, this energy current then enters you. And this is how I have learned all the divination methods. For the most part, I was just in the presence of someone who had the spirit, and that the spirit then was passed on to me. I have actually developed some rituals to do just this. So we would have like an old witch, somebody in their 60s, 70s. We would have these decks of cards which were passed on, like from generation to generation. And this is how the spirit continues itself. But I'm sure there are other ways how to do it. This is just what I have found to work best.
So, who is the best spirit to invoke, in your opinion, if one wants to increase the divinatory abilities?
Oh, I don't even think people should just invoke spirits. Divination is definitely safer to learn and practice. Not everybody should or can get into magic, but see, I don't think that evocation of spirits is like the go-to method for these things. I really don't. I think you would do better like journaling, meditating, or even just get yourself some kind of divination deck that is like powerfully imbued. Sometimes the author and the artist just manage to create something that just kicks in, like it works for people. Like whoever receives it, it does something. I won't give you a spirit because I don't think that evoking spirits is really the easiest or even the most advisable way to get psychic powers.
Yeah, and it's definitely not not the most advisable way in the sense of safety. But if it
were a black magician who knows what they are doing, they should try to find as quick as they can the spirits who are actually already aligned with them through bloodline, ancestry, pacts that they have done in previous lifetimes. Just make a call and see who answers. And the first spirits to answer are probably the ones who are like, easiest available to work with you, because it should be their offer, like not you trying to gain a spirit's favor. It should be them coming to you or offering you something. And you can even do this, I guess, with like a pendulum. Just get a list of every spirit that you can think of, get the sigils, and just see where you get some kind of resonance. Or you can do journaling, dream interpretation, and just see who comes to you. Just make the call. Somebody will answer.
Yeah, so technically, I will be honest here. I do not have best experience with pendulum divination, but because
it is risky. I absolutely agree. It is, for some reason, it just gets people connected to false spirits. It makes them fall into trance. I was not teaching this method for a long time, until I figured out like how to do it really safely. I totally agree with you. People shouldn't be playing with the pendulum or the spirit board.
Yeah.
But then again, all of this is dangerous. Might still be preferable to evoking random spirits.
Yeah. So technically, can you tell us the safe way of using the pendulum? That's something I will benefit from personally.
Well, I would think that you should set up a really clear ritual space. Do the circle, clean everything, evoke the watchtowers or the elemental powers. Just make sure that the physical space where you are performing this, that nothing enters what is not supposed to be there. That's what you call like ritual hygiene, I guess, protection and purification of you, the operator, the tools, and the space. If you do this properly, that will significantly lower the chance that you'll just tap into something randomly. And that's what I think happens to people when they just approach this as a game. And then they are pretty surprised when, object starts moving and falling off the shelves, and just funny shit happens.
Yeah, but how to clean the pendulum? How to cleanse it?
Well, it would most often be metallic, like brass. So I would clean it with fire, and with incense, smudge. But sometimes, rarely, objects can become possessed. And for that, I don't have any easy solution. If that happened to you in particular, then that would be, something to really get the background.
I'm gonna tell you what I did. So I took a cross and then I consecrated it with the essence of light. But I kind of use the pendulum for a time to get answers, but then I get pissed because I want something more detailed. So I return to my spirit summoning.
Yes, it is. Every method of divination has its pros and its cons, and pendulum or the spirit board can be fairly lengthy. Like, trying to get words and sentences out of it is super slow. So it would not be effective. Some people can work with cards fairly efficiently. They just tap into those images, but the supreme method really is like channeling, direct spirit communication, because that way you can get the full picture. And it just depends on you if you want to record it by writing, automatic writing, or if you want to I use a tape recorder to record myself in trance, or when you have an assistant, that can be very efficient too, because one person is in trance as the medium and the other one, gives the questions and records the answers.
So if you wanted to choose one spirit who enhanced your divinatory abilities the most, who would that be?
I would not be in that situation because I'm fairly content with what I can pull off. But I think it would be a good idea to, to address the ancient oracles, like the Oracle of Delphi, the Sibylla, the famous prophets and oracles of the past, whoever they are in your part of the world.
So when you mentioned the Oracle of Delphi, the most powerful ritual which kind of boosted my ability to receive visions and to boost psychic senses in general was a ritual with Abaddon, aka Apollo. So what I did is I performed the black sun meditation, which is you visualize the black sun above your head, and then you visualize the rays of the black sun penetrating the edges of what you consider your sacred space. And you hold that visualization until you can literally feel the rays of the black sun radiating from the edges of the space like a shield. Once that happens, then you call Abaddon within the space. The chant I suggest is Abaddon Angelos Abyssus. So you repeat the chant over and over again. Abaddon appears, and then you ask him to increase your ability to perceive spirits. Now, because I do not have talent for divination, my ability to see the future didn't increase a lot. I had some interesting things which I kind of prophesized and they came true, but I am not satisfied with that because it's not something I can rely on. But it's not something you can control. It's like me walking and then I go into trance and spirit tells me what will happen and it happens. But it's not something I can control. I cannot like tell Abaddon, hey Abaddon, tell me a result of a football game, right? I cannot do that. Right? It's always unwilling, trance-induced vision. So to me, like how to interpret the visions received in divination? That's the main question.
That is, I guess, what it boils down to, because most people, when they're in trance and channeling, they don't speak consistent sentences. They mostly have visions come to them. So you just do your best describing what it is, or you record it and then you meditate over it later. And sometimes, like with prophecy and divination, you will not know the true meaning of what you have seen until it starts happening, because you're just not meant to know. It is a message for your future self, basically. That's why you should always record it. That's why I always force my students to start the journals, because you will be getting back to your notes 6 months later, a year later, and sometimes only then you will see, okay, this is now starting to happen.
Yeah, but since you teach a lot of beginners magic and divination, I have a question for you. So the main thing I got asked from all kinds of beginners is how to develop abilities to perceive spirits. So can you share a little bit of light on this?
I don't go that far. I never really taught groups of people, random students from the public, how to evoke or perceive spirits. But I gave them the opportunity to experience it. Like when the spirits comes through the medium, they can witness it and they can ask questions. So that again, it goes back to my advice. You really need to be in a physical presence, experience physically in the presence of people who already do this, and and then, you know, the current just can be passed on to you. I think that is the easiest and safest way how to go about this. But for people who have the natural talent in them and who have the desire really should be enough. I mean, you know, like they don't reside far from our world, and some spirits especially, you know, they are used to communicate with mankind, you know, since the dawn of civilization. So just your desire to communicate with them and you expressing that desire, for example, by gathering the symbols of that spirit, doing some reading, studying, journaling, preparing an altar, give them a sacrifice, an offering. The druids always told me that the first thing you should do, that it's good manners to give some kind of gift, some kind of offering to the spirits, because they are essentially a guest to your house if they decide to come. So that might be a good advice as well, but you gotta figure out what kind of offering or present they prefer so that you don't offend the spirit. And that just, you know, we keep getting back to the fact that, you know, dealing with spirits and prophecy and stuff was never meant for like broad public.
Okay. So since we talked about Grim Reaper and Morana, what I can say about Morana is that her favorite offering is the purest form of life energy possible. So you either offer the blood, you either offer reproductive products, or you offer your own life force in a direct form. What are the favorite offerings to Grim Reaper?
Well, you would have to ask him, I guess, if he's even willing to talk to you, because we're basically talking about the form of Lucifer, who is the lord of this world. He's at the very top of the infernal hierarchy. And my personal experience has always been that this spirit just doesn't talk to anyone. He will more likely send some subordinate, you know, some lower demon. So you really have to get like an introduction or have some favor with him already. I don't think it's a good idea to go there directly. But some people do it anyway.
Yeah, I am one of those people who do it anyway. So I summoned Lucifer, but never in a Grim Reaper form. So I summoned him in two forms, the angel form and the infernal emperor form.
Yeah, I have seen those two as well, like the angel with the crimson wings, and also the emperor that is seated on the throne. I've seen them too.
So the really interesting thing you can do to appease Lucifer in those forms is to technically build up your light body. So how I do that personally is I go into trance, and then you breathe in bright light until you started radiating it. Your aura starts radiating it, and then what you do is you offer a little bit of that white light from your aura to him as a lord of light, as a gift.
Interesting. Very
And
nice.
that's like a really nice way to connect to him in the two forms I worked with him. There is also a third form, which is him as a shining serpent. So that's the third form of him I witnessed. And there is a fourth form, which is the form of him as a horned god. So,
yes.
like a radiant horned being with bright wings and agricultural symbolism, like shining trees and golden grass and large lake in the distance. So that's the fifth form of him. But technically, since we talk about Lucifer in Grim Reaper aspect, I never worked with it, so I cannot speak about it. But
I'm fairly close to that horned god as well, who shows us the goat of the Sabbath, and he can be worshipped and appeased by offerings of wine, red wine especially, singing, dancing, orgies, anything sexual, what I found through experience is that, so the god of the witches' Sabbath, Lucifer, as the god of the witches' Sabbath, he just loves like indecent exposure. So just like the classical orgiastic liturgy that you can think of, the legends of the witches' Sabbath, that's what he likes. He actually declined blood. He said that as the lord of animals and the night forest, as the god of the witches' Sabbath, that all life is sacred to him. So he declined my offering of blood, and he instead wanted me to get drunk and just walk up the sacred hill. And
Okay.
I saw many drunk people there that night, and they were singing and dancing, obscene songs. So that felt very pagan.
Yeah, yeah. But working with Lucifer, what I experienced is, I don't know for you, you are a female, maybe for women that's different. But for me, working with Lucifer is in any form is like a military training. He really.
Oh, sure. Yeah, he is for sure a fairly strict spirit. I don't despite I would never, I would never doubt that. His other worshippers, including women, they told me that sometimes when they displease him, they wake up and they feel like somebody has beaten them with a stick. So he can inflict physical pain on you, or even like ask for a sacrifice of pain. That is something he likes a lot. Yes, drill sergeant for sure.
Yeah. So how you started, like, I don't know, like, do you practice any meditations, any rituals with him, anything you can share with people?
I've gotten to a stage where everything is like very improvised, very intuitive. I have recently moved all across the ocean, so I had to let go of all of my ritual gear basically. So I was really left with a few oracle decks and my journal. My journal would be the one thing that I never let go of, because that's where I record the dreams and the visions.
Yeah, cool. So you have a crystal ball here, which is cool. Like, it's really well made. So can you tell us how?
Thank you.
Yeah. So can you tell us how you use this ball specifically? And then I will share you a really interesting anecdote you will definitely like.
Oh, this is actually a Buddhist. This is a Buddhist relic. This is in honor of one of the Eastern deities. It's uh, it's a family heritage of my, my host. So I just borrowed it.
Cool. It's really nice. So regarding the work with Lucifer, there is one really interesting episode I never mentioned publicly. Uh, so technically, I invoked Lucifer, and then I asked him to kind of give me wealth and influence within this world. He agreed, and he told me that I should embrace my willingness to rule others.
That is a good advice.
And then a few days after, I went to my father. My father lives in the middle of nowhere. Like, that's a house like 4 or 5 kilometers from civilization, but like there is no road up to the city.
Oh.
So it's like woods and it's middle of nowhere. And because my father is an interesting guy and he knows a bunch of stuff, he was invited to meet with some oppositional political leader. And then because he was bored and he kind of didn't want to go there by himself, he led me with him too. So we went together there. And then, like, in the beginning, I was like just a crazy guy in a corner, and I had some difficulties walking, so I wasn't interesting to them in the beginning. And they like talked to my father and some other people there, and I was like bored as fuck. But then they started talking about the elections, which are upcoming, and then I started explaining them what is the meaning of our flag from the occult perspective, what is the meaning of all kinds of stuff, all kinds of symbolism. I was like just bored and I simply wanted to talk about something. And they were impressed by what I told them. So one of the guys there like invited me to go to become a member of that specific party, and I wasn't like into it. What happens 4 months later, right? So the oppositional party, I spoke with a guy, joins a coalition and wins the election after 3 decades. Like one party ruled for 3 decades, and then that oppositional coalition, I talked with the leader, wins. The guy who invited me became one of the advisors to the prime minister for a time.
See, it was an opening for you.
It was an opening, but I declined everything because I didn't wanted to vilify my principles. I never wanted to be a part of a political system. That's simply not how I function. But I still continued working with Lucifer, more like a mystical, transgressive being. So I definitely understand that he is one of the spirits who established the hierarchy system we live in.
Oh,
But
definitely.
this is not the way I want to approach the guy. There is also one meditative technique I want to share with the audience. So you summon him in the infernal emperor form. And what is the chant for summoning the infernal form? The chant is Lucifer Imperator Infernum. You do this within a sacred space, of course, so you are sure he will come. When he arrives, then you breathe in like a fire, and then you channel the fire up to your third eye, and you visualize that fire burning through the third eye and purifying it. And you do it for over 15 minutes. And this is something I did with him a lot. However, there is one thing I need to kind of warn with working with Lucifer is that here is the thing. There is a point in your spiritual evolution in which he literally doesn't care will you make it out. Like,
oh, I must be there right now.
yeah, like he doesn't care will you make it out.
No,
I remember
he flat out told me that he will not help me. And that was the single most puzzling thing that I've ever heard from a spirit. Like, what?
yeah,
I've been serving you for millennia and you tell me that you won't help me, but somebody else might? Well, I guess it's my time to prove myself.
so technically there is a way of you like tweaking the restrictions. So he told you that he will not help you directly, right? So he will not go in like a motherfucker and clean the mess. So he will not do that. But what he will definitely do is he can teach you how to clean the mess yourself. So you can simply call him and ask him what technique you should use to obtain the skill to clean the mess. Because that's what he did to me. So I was
And he even used the same words, so I know that what you're speaking is spot on because he basically told me, look, I can't solve this for you. You've made some mess in the previous centuries, and it will take you up to 5 years to clean that mess, and I won't and can't do it for you.
Okay, so we are at the same page here. So I wanted this to be more of a Slavic podcast, but this is definitely going in a Lucifer direction because Lucifer is everywhere. So I will kind of title it Infernal Podcast of Lightbearer or something. So let's talk about Lucifer for one more hour, if you don't mind, because we barely touched the surface and we talked for
Okay,
almost.
can I get a drink? Can we just reconnect?
You
can let it roll, let the camera rolling. I just need to get some drink because we've been talking for an hour. So we should.
Party as long as I can hear what you are saying. I don't care. This is like not any formal podcast
So
where
do
like
do you have the video? Like, have you been capturing it?
yeah, I have been capturing it. Don't worry. I am not here to waste your time.
Hey,
So
just give me a minute. I need to get myself a drink, okay?
yeah, so I will talk. So technically, guys, for a minute, I will give you one more meditative technique with Lucifer. So you raise a sacred space. you summon Lucifer in infernal form, and then you ask him to bite you with his serpents, with his snakes. And he will kind of do exactly that. You will see his luminous snakes rising up from him and biting your astral body and filling you with his poison. This is something really powerful. This form of transformation will greatly empower you, and it will greatly empower your astral body, and it will purify everything. Invocation of Lucifer is best done at Friday during the night hour of Venus, but it can also be done at Saturday. Regarding my experience with Lucifer, I personally advise him to not be the first spirit you summon. And yeah, our friend in the podcast is back, so welcome. So, can you tell me, like, because a lot of people are hitting me up for selling their souls. Like, can you,
I
can
can
you
imagine.
can you please shed some light on that subject, because I'm sick of answering that question.
Oh, definitely. Well, what they mean actually is entering a pact or a contract, covenant, which is something more serious and more long-term than just making a petition or making a spell with a spirit. This basically gives the spirit authority over your life. So you become their agent in this world. In exchange for that, you will get more boon, you will get more protection, prosperity. It will make you more popular. Well, whatever that particular spirit is willing to give you or whatever you ask for. Pacts should always exist in a written form. You should always have it written down somewhere. What did you and the spirit agreed upon? There is always a phase of like preliminary negotiation where the spirit will make some demands on you and you will put out your requests and they will either say yes or no. You can do this yourself, or you can actually have a magician facilitate this for you. This was done in previous centuries and it's still being done today, so I think it's perfectly fine. Me and my associates, we always forced people to come in person, sign in blood, be there for the ceremony, and we invoked the spirit through a medium so that they could actually talk to them. And let me tell you, this has always been a fairly intense experience.
And
So
especially,
I'm a bit saddened that people nowadays do it online. I just think that, even for the purpose of honoring the tradition and getting yourself in it, I think people just should not be trying to look for too much shortcut here, because it is a very formal, binding type of contract which actually outlasts your life. Unless, which is fairly rare, you do the pact for a set amount of time, let's say, a year and a day, then you are doing this for the lifetime. And if you do not dissolve it, it will actually outlast you and you will still be born with the pact, in your next lives.
but there is a one piece of advice I can give to the guys who want to dissolve the pact, because due to commercialization of the occultism and people charging for services, there is a lot of pacts which are made, which in reality shouldn't be created. So a lot of people are coming to me how to decline the pact.
See, well then service has created demand for another service.
Yeah. So one way is to call Lucifer Jafakale to
Yes, the Lord of Pacts. That's a good idea.
But other method is for me much better. So you summon the entity and then you offer to that entity the piece of your divine spark, like small miniature piece of your divine spark, in return for declination of the pact. And that will usually be accepted 99.9% of the time. I have two instances in which this was refused. One instance was with Hindu gods, with Kali, because Kali wanted me to really become a Kali devotee. My pact with Kali was technically informal, so I never signed anything. But there is some warning I need to give. In certain cultures, for example, the Hindu culture or the Serbian culture, there are no written pacts. So, for example, let's say you want to work with Morana, you summon Morana. Everything you say is considered as if you are writing a pact.
Yes,
So
it can be spoken. Sometimes people get themselves in trouble by speaking oaths or swearing or cursing.
yeah. So technically, Kali refused to annul my oath, and Persian spirits refused. So my entire next year will be dedicated to the Persian entities. So whatever I do next year will be alongside the Persians. Uh, so those are two methods to decline the pacts. But what I wanted to ask you is this. Since you channel a lot, I also channel, but here's the thing. When I personally channel, I never go to the point I completely lose myself. The deepest point I get is when I know something is there, and after the end of the channeling, I remember just bits and pieces of it, right? So I remember maybe 5% of what happened, but 95% I completely am oblivious. You can like beat my ass and I will not remember. So, so how you channel?
Well, that's what I was getting at. You either need to, so there's three methods that I will give you, and they will work for different people. The first is automatic writing. Actually, automatic typing. I figured out that my handwriting is just way too slow, so I went to do this in typing. And then I would have to correct the typos as soon as possible, before the memory was lost. I've had a friend who successfully, enters spirit communications. So she writes the questions and then she records the answers. So you get a paper with the record afterwards, after they leave. This was done by spiritualists a lot in 19th century. The second method would be speaking to a tape recorder. This allows you to lose yourself more in the sense that you can close your eyes, you can lie down. What I discovered is that people tend to speak wicked slow when they are channeling, so it sounds funny. It is sort of difficult to do this alone, so really like the master method, I think, exactly for the purpose that you stated. You lose yourself, so you need somebody to guide you through that experience and to put you into trance, take you back, give you the questions, and make sure that you answer. So I think the most effective channeling cannot be done just by one person alone. Like, you always need to be present with someone, because then you can lose yourself in the experience, but you don't lose all the knowledge. The deeper I go, the less I remember. It's the same for me.
Yeah. So one trick I use when I channel, this is risky, so I definitely do not advise you to do this. But if you want to do this, especially with Saturnian entities, this will like be crazy. So you invoke the spirit, and then you proclaim that you allow the spirits to vampirize you from within, to increase the intensity of the presence. And like I had, because I do it all the time, so like when I am teaching somebody and when I wanna stop teaching them, what I usually do is I give them a really difficult task to do. So a really difficult ritual to do. So either the person will like become terrified and leave me alone, or I will actually realize the guy wants to practice this. So I
Yeah.
told one motherfucker I was teaching who was like really annoying. He was like all the time, channel me this, channel me that. So I told him, look, invoke Lilith as I taught you, and then tell her to vampirize you from within. And after that happened, he like got his abilities increased by 10 to 20%. So this is like really, really risky, but if you do this with Morana, I think that will be the strongest thing, one of the strongest things you did. So regarding my work with Lucifer specifically, there is one anecdote I need to share. At 2018, I was in the water, in the pool. Oh, no, I was in a mineral bath. And in a mineral bath, I saw a giant sigil of Lucifer. And that same day, I went to medical examination, and they told me that my health was like in a breaking point, like close to a breaking point. At that same day, when I saw Sigil of Lucifer, he told me that everything will be kind of reforged or destroyed within a year. At exact point, like a year after I had that examination and a vision, I completely collapsed and I was bedridden for 9 months. So yeah, one more instance of Lucifer being correct about the future. But the thing with Lucifer is that you cannot willingly ask him to give you answers to the questions you ask. So you cannot ask Lucifer for results of football matches or something. He will always give prophecies which are extremely important for your evolution. And if he doesn't seem or think that question is important, he will usually give a cryptic answer which can mean 120 different things. So he will tell you something just for you to fuck off. He will be really clear only if the thing is extremely important to you.
It's true. It's true for all the spirits, actually.
uh, Actually, what I found out is that the spirit you can like bribe for prophecies, whatever you want, is like Mammon. So you can like summon Mammon and you can invoke him and tell him to vampirize you from within, and then he will give you any necessary information you need. But he is one of the spirits which can be bribed in this manner. For example, Lucifer cannot. Like, you can
No.
give Lucifer as much life force as you wish, he will not do it. And Lucifer, I had a really interesting experience. So I was trying to like project the power of divine spark of mine to like direct spirits to do what I wanted them to do. When I tried to do this with Lucifer, I said I am like the incarnation of the divine, I am so and so, and I started emanating light and everything. You know that mode magicians go into, right? When they want to transmute light. And then what happened is after I finished my introduction and radiating light and shit, Lucifer simply said, and I am Lucifer. And he like stood there and refused to talk to me until I reduced the amount of my light and started talking to him without trying to tell him what to do. So what I also say is that you cannot command him in any way.
No, he's not a servitor, serving spirit by any
Yeah.
means, but he has authority over other spirits. So sometimes he can be addressed, to settle scores, basically, to settle disputes.
Yeah, but again, when we talk about Lucifer, what you can like, if you returned in the past, like, what would you say to yourself when you started working with Lucifer? What's that one thing you missed?
Oh my, I still think that I'm missing a whole lot. But the thing that I was missing out on greatly for many years is I didn't realize that spells, pacts, and covenants, it's not just whatever you've done since you've been teenager, but they outlive you throughout the centuries. So you might actually have a bunch of fairly powerful spells, enchantments, pacts, covenants, soul contracts, curses too, from past lives. You didn't come here as a clean slate. So then you realize that, like, whatever you have been up to in the recent decades, it's just like the tip of that iceberg. The mountain, it goes like way, way, way down.
So I have an interesting note to share there. The reason I have obsession with Chernobyl is technically because, according to the preserved stories, the founder of my bloodline, so the founder of my family line, the guy who actually first carried the surname I carry now, so technically the ancestor, he had an episode. So he technically went into a meal, and in a meal he was sleeping. And in the night he was awakened by the devil, and he wrestled with the devil and then, quote unquote, survived. But later on I find out that it's not actually the case. He actually made a pact with the Chernobog to achieve certain things, and he achieved those things in return. So there is actually a generational pact between.
Yes. Oh, pacts can be passed down from ancestry, sure, just as curses.
Yeah. So technically, since you see the Chernobog's emblem, and the first thing you saw was that eagle. My first spiritual experience was actually, I thought it was shadow people, but later on I figured out that it was one of the Chernobog's messengers. So my first spiritual experience ever was technically one of Chernobog's messengers. And that's the main reason I introduced him to you, because I think there is something there.
Well, thank you.
Those The first spirit who comes to you is usually the one who has something to do with the bloodline,
Oh,
and you.
sure. I don't doubt it. That's why I told you this story, because I was ritualistically conceived in his sign. Perhaps, in the days of old, it could have been some cult sign, because the house signs usually pointed to something way, way older. Like the first time the house was built 1,000 years ago, they would call the place, the Black Eagles. So whatever was there before, it could have been a pagan sanctuary, could have been a sacrificial place.
Yeah, but I'm gonna talk about Lucifer and Chernobyl together. So you work with Lucifer, and he's like light, so he emanates light. But Chernobyl is like polar opposite of that. Chernobyl emanates what only can be described as black light. He's like as opposite to Lucifer as you can imagine. But in a really weird way, they are kind of similar figures. Uh, what I can say about Chernobyl and Lucifer is the type of polarity those two exhibit with each other is much different than the type of polarity Lucifuge and Lucifer have. Because energy of Chernobyl is much more intense than the energy of Lucifuge. And if I have to choose a polar opposite of Lucifer, that would be Chernobyl. However, they are both adversarial gods. But there is an interesting thing I want to share. There is an interesting connection. So within the Temple of the Ascending Flame and this entire Luciferian legend, there is a connection between Lucifer and the dragon, the figure known as the dragon or the beast. Well, within a Wallachian tradition of Wallachian sorcery, you have the following pantheon. At the bottom of the pantheon, you have the Fae. Then outside of the pantheon, at like borders, you have Chernobyl and Morana as the like dark pair. Then above the Fae, you have the four dragons, which represent the four elements. And then beyond all of that, you have primordial being known as Zmeo or the dragon. So Chernavog is the one who can directly give the keys to the dragon, to the Zmeo, to the Lord of the Dragons. But there is also a connection between Lucifer and the dragons. Lucifer is a golden dragon. So more and more I go into this entire story, more and more I realize that all of those dark gods are technically the limited incarnations of one and the same thing. So the cultural context is different and the forms are different, but it is essentially all connected to the same source, which is the dragon. So technically, Valachian form of the dragon, Zmeo, is definitely not the totality of it. It's like a limited form of the dragon. But that Valachian, aka Serbian form, is the purest incarnation of the dragon I encountered. The only thing which comes close to this is Ahriman from the Persian tradition. But I had much stronger experiences with the Zmeo from the Valachian one. When I asked that being, what is your purpose, what you want, when I asked this male what he wants, what he told me is something really interesting. I do not want anything. I already achieved everything. There is nothing you can do for me. But there is one thing you could if you wanted. So that's your choice. And that is to make yourself and your entire people more dragon-like. So he called it Zmayevity. In translation to the English, it means dragon-like. So it kind of led me again to the old legends in the Balkans. I don't know, do you have it in Czechia still? I think you don't. But it's definitely present in Bulgaria, Serbia, Romania. So that notion of dragon men, technically, those dragon men are born in like special circumstances and they have the ability to soul travel at will and transform into dragons and fight with evil spirits who bring hail. And they also have the ability to do magic and have visions and all kinds of stuff. And they tend to be supernaturally strong. One guy who was actually the last guy who was actually a dragon man is buried near a church. In the yard of the church you have a tree, and below the tree he is technically buried. Some guys recently tried to chop from that fucking tree and they got fucking slaughtered. So that's kind of interesting connection between Lucifer and Chernobyl. They both guard gates to the same current, essentially. But what I wanted to ask you is how one can attune himself to the energy of Lucifer. How you do that? Like, is there any preparation you do to work with him, or you just call him up?
Well, since I was born in that current and I reaffirmed that allegiance through making pacts already years ago and as a teenager even, I don't really have to start in any particular way. But if a person were to make that call for the first time, I would tell them, and that's actually what I'm it's actually what I tell them in this grimoire that I'm writing right now. It's got these 9 initiatory tasks, and I think the second or the third one is like go to a desolate place, either a crossroads in a desolate place or somewhere up on a hill, up on a mountain, and there make the call.
Yeah. But my personal experience with Lucifer was, it was really weird. I kind of started summoning him, and my first pact with Lucifer was technically to defend me from vampiric entities. I had certain vampiric attachments,
and I wanted to get rid of them. And Lucifer kind of offered himself to teach me how to get rid of those attachments. So I signed a pact with him to get rid of those attachments, and he would remove the entities. But he demanded of me to stop exhibiting certain behaviors, which I exhibited, and I didn't. He would come during the day and warn me to stop exhibiting
Oh,
those behaviors, and
yeah,
I do it again. And every time the attachments would return. So there is an important message here. Those vampiric attachments, those entities, those shadows, they feed off energy we radiate. And if we exhibit behaviors which attract those entities, they will return.
of
So
course.
despite of spirits removing them, we have to do our own thing. And really work with spirits have to be two directional. You have to do your own part, and spirit will do his own. For example, let's say you want to improve your financial situation with the spirit, right? So what majority of the people do is they just do the spell and sit on their ass. That's essentially how people approach. But the only way to approach it is to like summon the entity, ask for a job or for a raise or whatever, and then do all of the physical actions necessary for that to
Yes,
happen.
that is called acting in accordance.
Yeah, but when you do that, essentially, what you need to understand is you need to do those physical actions without thinking about the end result. So let's say
Yes.
you casted a spell for money and for a new job. And what you need to do then is you need to write like 20 job applications and apply to 20 different places without expecting to be accepted in a single one of them. And then entity will out of those 20 places open you the opportunity to work in the best one. That's how magic functions. That's how magic
Yes. I totally agree. You need to give the universe, the spirits, maximum potency, maximum power. You don't try to force your own solutions. You don't try to get in your own way. You just let them decide for you because that's why you call them in the first place because they are eternal and they have more insight. They can see the parts that you don't see.
yes. And here is the thing. What happens a majority of times is they summon the entity, for example, Lucifer, and they open the gate, but we simply do not walk to it. That's the reason why I told my story about the advisor of the prime minister, because that's the classical example of enormous opportunity purposefully being cheated on by me. And this is a really extreme example. I imagine that smaller form of this happens to a lot of people. I kind of had a really big opportunity because I did some really big things for Lucifer in the past. I opened him a bunch of gateways, worked with him like crazy, filmed a lot of material in his name to kind of introduce people to him, and I did a bunch of things. So I got a big opportunity. But what I want to say is you cannot accept to have a supernatural powers until you really dedicate yourself to the current, to the point that you transcend yourself and realize who you are. Until that point, you will have synchronicities, you will have coincidences, you will have the currents from the spirit world crossing your way and manifesting things for you. But you have to invest the effort necessary for the things to work. That's the part which is the most important. And you also need to realize that manifestation by magic is also subject to the laws of nature, which means that manifestation of singular thing can last for months, if not years, especially if you have big goals. No matter how powerful you are, you will always face difficulties in your manifestation, especially in beginning, and you have to be able to survive the turmoil. So there is a one really important, like not really important, but really funny thing. You told me that you found a new love life through an oracle. So since it's kind of funny and interesting, can you tell me? Can you share with us the story here? without
Oh.
revealing private details.
Yeah, well, I will not reveal his real name, but so a year ago, I actually it relates to Lucifer as well, because Lucifer was the one who told me that he won't help me to manifest my soulmate, but that the Knights Templar might help me. That was very cryptic. Anyway, I did some ritual with a friend under his guidance to manifest a soulmate, and we got a random channeled sentences. Some of them made sense right away. Some of them were cryptic, and some of them I still haven't deciphered. And one of these sentences said, Richardson knows the way. Like a surname, like an English-sounding surname, knows the way, as if it addressed a person. At that time, I didn't know anybody by that surname. So the best thing that I could come up with was I typed it into Facebook and see if perhaps somebody in my network or like a friend of a friend is not named Richardson. And I did come up with a bunch of people, but there was not a strong connection with any one of them. And then I come across one who is actually a psychic fortune teller. And I'm like, okay, well, it says Richardson knows the way, so maybe the spirit is trying to guide me to this fortune teller to give me a reading, and that's what will help manifest my cause. So I added him and we started talking a little bit. I even did order some reading, but it never came through because I like changed my mind. I was basically ignoring this crucial piece of advice for quite some time, and then later, at a certain point, we finally reconnect, and guess what? I mean, we met and we fell in love, and I visit this man, and on his altar in his bedroom, I find this sigil, which has been collecting dust. It was apparently been there for a long time. And I'm like, what is this? And he is, oh, that's like a soulmate manifestation sigil. But, then I got back with my ex-wife, tried to make things work. And I'm like, wow. So when did you do this ritual? And he did it a month before I did mine, which got me his name, and that's how we connected. I would have never found him if it wasn't for the audience. So I think his ritual basically triggered my ritual, but we both had too many things going on and possibly some karmic contracts with other people, exes, and all of this needed to be sorted out before we could finally meet. So here I am a year later, and I just brought the crystals and the talisman from that ritual of mine, and I put it on his sigil, and it felt like super powerful. It knocked my socks off and his when we connected those two rituals, because I think they belong together.
Interesting. So I am really happy for you.
Thank you.
I need to share my own personal experience with this. I have two experiences. One of them ended really, really badly. One of them ended really, really good for me. So I had a friend of mine, like she was 38, 39, and she had like similar life experience as me, and she was also a witch, so we connected. And I started writing a book, essentially filming a course. But then our relationship, like friendship, collapsed. So it was like a friendship with romantic elements. It was not an open relationship, right? But I like those platonic, spiritual, nonsensical stuff happening. And it collapsed. And with that collapsed the course I was filming, because I didn't have the driving force for it. So I called Hecate and tell her to connect me with that person again. And Hecate says, okay, that will happen. So another person comes into my life, which is like even more resonating with me. And then I start writing the book again. I channel 27 sigils, tons of rituals, bunch of incantations and shit. It's like still in paper. And like that friendship and like romantic interest also collapsed, but it collapsed not as intensely as the last one, because I corrected some of the flaws from previous instance, but it still pretty much worked in the same way and ended in the same way. So that's the bad thing I had to share. The good thing I had to share is I paid for a channeling fluid. And that person tells me I need to take the turastramonium, right? And I then don't take the turastramonium as a seed because that's deadly. And I didn't have the balls to do it. So I go to Serbia with my brother and I meet his girlfriend who is a homeopathic doctor. Like she prescribes homeopathic remedies. And then according to my personality, she analyzes that my perfect homeopathic remedy was the turastramonium.
I am not surprised. It is very fitting for a black magician.
Yeah, she never knew about the prophecy. I told her that later on.
Oh.
What I also did with that homeopathic doctor as an experiment is I invoked spirits and told them to give me a visions of the plants according to which I should take a homeopathic remedy. It worked 11 times correctly. So each 11 times, when I invoke the spirit and receive the vision of the plant, when you Google the description of a plant into the dictionary, one of the things plant does is related to what I need. So what you are describing is you are sending the information into the collective field of consciousness, and whoever resonates with that information will indeed reply. And
Yes.
it makes sense that your spell created a tunnel in reality connecting you and that guy. I really like to hear crazy manifestation stories. And I believed you because I did to myself the negative version of that. So, yeah. Technically, what I also want to say, since we work with Lucifer here, both of us, is that when you work with Lucifer, you pointed that in your Facebook posts, and I agree with that 100%. There is no possibility of effectively working with Lucifer within a social consensus. You have to transgress in some way. You have to do things which are considered disgusting in the eyes of society. Now, it is a personal responsibility of a magician to not go into that transgression in a way he cannot handle. Because here is the thing. Everybody talks about ritual pedophilia, human sacrifice, and things of that nature related to the Luciferian currents. But here is the thing. Those extremely transgressive acts, like rape of children, they stimulate the chakras below the root, so the animalistic chakras located in the legs. But they stimulate them in a such a manner that no man can do those rituals without becoming insane.
Yes,
so
it's true.
those people perform those rites. I do not doubt that they have manifestation of the things they want, but
the price that comes to them is too heavy, and I even remember engaging in these cult practices in previous centuries where it was more common, and I did go insane a bunch of times. And I was born into child abuse, just like many magicians, so it follows you then even later.
I was also abused, but not by my parents. I had that luck to not be abused by a family member. But technically what one needs to understand is that we need to transgress enough to be empowered, but not enough to go insane. Because once you go insane in that manner, you cannot turn back, you cannot return, because your psyche will become fragmented and you will become incapable of performing magical rituals.
Unfortunately, there is a lot of fragmented magicians out there too, and when you throw alcohol and drugs onto it, that's how you really seal the deal, because then you will never be able to integrate back on.
Yeah, but my personal way of transgressing is how I do this. My personal method of transgression is to infuse the pieces of my divine spark into the portals created for the spirits. So it kind of creates an unnatural alchemy of the soul, if it makes sense, because it binds the aspect of your spark into the spiritual current. And then, through the vehicle of that spiritual current, that piece of divine spark returns to you in changed form, which is technically unnatural. So you are fusing your soul really directly in a natural way to the infernal currents. That's my way of transgressing. One way I also use transgression is technically to curse the veil between the worlds. So you summon the entity, in this case Lucifer, and then you curse the veil. So you literally push the energy into the veil in order to rip it so that spirits can pass through it more easily. What this will do long term is it will make more people susceptible to all forms of psychic attack from the underworld. Well, why would anybody do this? Why would anybody do this? The thing is this. Majority of people do not die from black magical attack. Killing with black magic is extremely difficult, and it happens really rarely. Even when it happens, it usually happens to the people who are already close to the line. Killing the healthy individual is something majority of magicians, despite of boasts, are incapable of doing. So when you curse the person, or when negative entity or chthonic entity, which is not exclusively negative, like a demonic being, when they attack people, they do not attack them to kill them. They attack them to awaken a potential within them. It's like when somebody punches you in the face, you are not dead. Your entire organism starts producing adrenaline, and you actually realize then what's capability of your body. The same thing happens when somebody is under spiritual attack. It's usually an experience which will activate them, their spiritual potential, and make them capable of realizing that there is a spirit world. One of the reasons why Islam is such a powerful religion is because majority of Muslim priests practice shaitanic sorcery. So all of those Muslim exorcists you see online, it's actually a closed circle. One priest sends the shayateen possess, another priest exorcise the shayateen, and it goes full circle. That's the reason why a bunch of people in Muslim world do not have any doubt that there are spirits, because magic is really strong, and everybody knows somebody who had experience with that.
Yes.
And the third way I use to transgress is to technically summon what we know as celestial entities. Then you summon what we know as infernal entities. However, I need to say that pure infernal and pure celestial entities do not exist. So every entity is to an extent a mix of both. Uh, but you summon more chthonic beings and more celestial beings. And then you command the more chthonic being to attack the more celestial being in your presence. And in the presence of the chthonic being, you feed off the energy of the angel until the infernal spirits banish the entity of the celestial providence completely. If this rite is repeated generally and consistently, for example, you summon Belial and Lucifer once a month, and you do banishing of Archangel Michael by summoning Archangel Michael and then telling Lucifer and Belial to attack him and to banish him. If this is done consistently, then what will happen is energy pathways within the body will realign to fit the infernal imprint. So they will realign to fit the chthonic realms. Your upper chakras, so from the crown to the root, will become infernalized. They will become infused with infernal energy, while your chakras below the root, which are located in the legs, will become more active. But they will become more active in a way which will not force you to slaughter people and rape children. You will become more capable of controlling those impulses in order to use those centers to link with the chthonic directly. So those are three ways I technically transgress. I also plan to add the acts of physical transgression in my practice, which do not involve rape and murder with physical objects. I think if we want to kill someone, we should become capable of killing with invisible weapons and build up that skill. I think killing people with physical objects is very lazy, which think pick up an axe and smash the head. Like even females, you can drag somebody and smash his head in the altar. It's not any philosophy. It doesn't involve any serious effort. And then you do the invisibility spell to hide the evidence and use the brain. But I think that's not the way to go. We need to learn to do this with sorcery. We need to build up that expertise. So what are some of the ways you would transgress personally? If you don't want to share some of those things, don't. But I think you could share something.
Well, I have mentioned already that the form of Lucifer, that is the horned god, seems to be especially pleased by anything orgiastic and like indecent exposure. So I've been actually doing nude photo shoots my entire life, and I publish this freely as much as censorship allows. So this is a transgression of the societal order, because like you are not supposed to expose yourself. You are not supposed to like openly do that in any shape or form. And it is empowering, and it could be used, you know, for all kinds of self-empowerment, sexual magic and stuff. But it is also a form of sacrifice. And some of these photo shoots that I have done were actually like fairly occult themed, or even took place in you know, like we did it on pagan holidays on Walpurgisnacht this year, and it was like a recreation of a pagan ritual actually. So that was like as witches Sabbath as you can get. That's one form of transgressing societal order. Another one would be through speech, so breaking taboos, speaking things which are not supposed to be spoken, also through writing. And I guess I could come up with something more, but this is just what what comes to my mind.
Yeah, and what you are willing to share. And the internet, of course. I understand that you probably do many other things you don't want to talk about on YouTube. But to be honest, in my personal case, I understand that nobody will actually come and challenge me. So I don't give a fuck that this is actually publicly said from my side. But I understand your perspective. So technically, if I want to sublimate my relationship with Lucifer in one sentence, that would be a relationship with abusive older brother. But that older brother is like that older brother is like eons older than me.
Yes.
Like,
Oh, I love this. I love that. I love this.
yeah. And the thing with him is that he personally, in the beginning, he is compassionate. In the beginning, he is really compassionate. But once you go beyond this interface, he becomes completely ruthless and compassionless, and he will never aid you in difficult situation, even when you are at the brinks of death. When I was bedridden, I asked him for help. Right? The dude, I was bedridden, I need help, and he was like, mm-mm. And then I called Marbas, and Marbas showed me the way 3 days after. So 3 days after the ritual, Marbas showed me what to do, and I did it, and I cured the problem. But Lucifer was like, no. So he's completely ruthless and compassionless. But that's what he needs to be, because he carries the title of Infernal Emperor. An emperor needs to have his legions. And in order to train the legions, you cannot be compassionate with the army. And that's what he is doing. He is offering us to become one of his legionnaires, to become one of his soldiers. And in return, when we become one of his soldiers, we will have the armies. So we will become emperors in whatever field we want to rule. But what also majority of people doesn't understand is, in order to become an emperor, you need to pass his drills. And majority of people who work with him or who claim to do so, they are not even willing to pass those drills. They are not even willing to start working seriously. They forever remain in that compassionate father Lucifer interface. So
Yes.
here is the thing. You found your husband. You
He
found
is
your you
he
found
is
your
not Santa Claus for sure.
yeah, yeah, you found your lover, but in order to find your lover, you passed through living hell, and it kinda can be seen at
Oh,
your
he
face.
did too. We both went through living hell. I was like even surprised to find this sigil here. So I told him, like you didn't give up on this ritual, just like me. You still carried those objects, but they're like I saw no light. At some point, like I just had it. I was just pretty much ready to give up on everything.
Yeah. But there is something I have to say, which is the same thing Lucifer told me a long ago. So he told me, like, in order to succeed on this path, you need to stop doing, you need to stop acting. And he then told me that the things I need to stop doing. But the first piece of the sentence was, you need to stop doing, you need to stop acting. And it was 5 years ago. It was maybe a year and a half after I started practicing. And only now I understand what it means. So, in order to become a perfect magician, according to Kali and Lucifer and many of those dark gods, you need to be so detached from the world that you see entire world and entire life simply as a movie. So it's not something you experience, it's something you simply observe. And into that movie, you simply at will project emotions, thoughts, and deeds you want through rites. So you need to have emotions intense enough to manifest things, but you also need to be completely detached from this world. So you cast a spell, and for you it doesn't matter will the spell manifest. You simply cast it and push the thing. And that's a degree of detachment I'm trying to reach right now. But it's extremely difficult. So I kind of needed to share this with you.
Thank
So,
you.
so the reason why my previous relationships and friendships collapsed with males and females like is because I became too emotionally attached to people. And when you become too emotionally attached to people, it leads to destruction. It leads to destruction of the relationship, destruction of you, destruction of everything. So I'm kind of learning right now to detach from everything and to observe everything as a movie. And one really important thing Kali told me is this. So During the day, your energy centers become stimulated, and the energy created by those centers mix, which creates what we know as emotions. Why is wrath red? Because root center is red. Why is love purple, green, and orange? When we feel it, you feel that energy through you, because the centers for the crown, heart, and roots are purple, green, and red and orange. So our emotions are pretty much just a mixture of energy centers stimulated during the day, upper and lower alike. So if you feel emotion which doesn't benefit you, you simply let it go, you let it flow, you detach from it. For example, let's say I have an argument with you in this interview, or there is something I dislike. What I should simply do is I ignore the emotion. But there is something I like, then I immediately attach to that in order to boost the interview. And you technically use this every single time, every single day. But the problem with this is that when you start doing this, you kind of become dehumanized. You kind of start losing your humanity or whatever you consider humanity is. And it becomes difficult to live, because if you just let go all of those things or accept others, over time, everything starts dissolving. And what you simply feel is some form of a void from which you project whatever you want to project. And it actually happens. So 5 nights ago, no, 10 nights ago, I called Kali and she simply told me that she will take care of my financial situation. And that happened within 2 days. Then I casted money spell and it also manifested within 3 days. So I had two money spells manifesting within less than 5 days. But how I did it is like simply didn't give a fuck. Will money spell work? I simply pushed the energy into the sigils and then went through my day. But in order to truly do that, you really need to forsake your humanity, because we as humans, for example, what's the first question psychologists ask you when you go there? Or what's the first question your mother ask you when she calls you? The first question is, how do you feel? So we are programmed to become attached to feelings. We are programmed to not treat the feelings as simple products of stimulation of energy centers. We are programmed to treat them as something serious. So in order to succeed in this craft, you kind of need to become a little child again. You need to delete everything from the brain, even the things we consider fundamental. For example, everybody talks about sex magic with Lilith, right? And with Lucifer, it's all about sex magic. They are all like crazy about it. So the main point about it is, when you talked about Hornet God, I'm gonna say the main story I have with the Hornet God specifically. So I worked with Lucifer a lot, and I worked with Shiva a lot, with those two gods. And both of them told me the same thing. They told me that sexual energy should be used, but it shouldn't be spent. It shouldn't be projected out unless the circumstances are extremely important. And I didn't knew what it means, right? So what I did as an idiot is I passed through months and months of sexual abstinence without doing anything with myself in that regard, thinking that that's what they meant. But just 20 days ago, I realized what they actually meant, which is you use your sexual energy, but you never orgasm. So by engaging with yourself or with others in that manner, you force energies to circulate through the system. But you never orgasm, which means that energy remains within a system and moves around the system and awakens all of the psychic senses and faculties. And it also makes you more able to manifest things, because since energy is constantly active but it's not releasing, you can simply project through the third eye or some other center into the sigil of a spell you are doing. So you will always have the energy necessary for the things you do, and you will not lose energy. But since I talk to a lot of female witches, I need to give a remark. So for the females, it works differently. Whenever females have those interactions, they receive energy. The only instance in which they lose energy if they do it without somebody else. So in a female case, that would be not doing it unless you have somebody else doing it. And also learning how to absorb that energy more effectively. Because what I found out with a bunch of females from my personal experience and from simply talking is that they do not know how to absorb that energy. So when they receive that energy, it's not channeled somewhere. It always goes like an explosion, and then it fills the entire aura of the female. And then something is absorbed, but good part of the energy is lost. So what I personally think is that for the females, the main concern should be the channeling of that force. Because I saw a lot of women who were like witches and non-witches who engaged in that a lot, and what they simply managed to do is to destroy themselves. Because if you don't know how to channel that energy and where, what happens is you simply overload the bunch of aspects of your energy system and you simply ruin the energy body. The same thing happens to males when they do it too much, but in the male case, it's not the energy overload which is causing destruction, it is the energy depletion. So technically, for the males, the best thing is the absence of the act. For the females, the best thing is the channeling of the act. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say about the horned god.
Good point. So maybe we could cut it here because we've been talking for 2 hours.
Yeah. So do you have any words to end the podcast then? Like
What?
something, no. Do you have any words to end the podcast then, to close the notes?
Oh no, I think that this was a great closure about sex magic, what you just said.
Yeah. So the main point is the absence of any release for the males. Yeah. And it's actually extremely difficult because you kind of can go crazy, but that's actually the point. To be at the edge of madness so you can perceive those guys. Anyway, thank you for being there. And yeah, it was a pleasure to talk to you. And you pretty much reminded me of the horned god I didn't summon the being in 5 months. So thank you all for watching, and yeah, I'll maybe call you in 8-9 months again. It was really good. And
Okay. Okay, sure.
peace out.